"You let my son drink what?" Anthony roared, storming into the room just as Leo collapsed, the pouch still in his tiny hand. Diana froze, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't poisoned him, but she was the only one who knew what really happened. And in that moment, as chaos exploded inside Rose Hill Mansion, everything she feared, her job, her freedom, her truth, was suddenly on trial. Rose Hill Mansion sat like a crown jewel over the still waters of Seneca Lake. The autumn breeze curled through the golden leaves, brushing against the white pillared estate like a whispered warning. Inside, it was quiet, too quiet for a home with a child. Down the long marble hallway, Diana Davies knelt, scrubbing a faint stain near the baseboard. Her rubber gloves creaked as she worked, one eye on the spotless floor, the other watching the child napping on the cream-colored sofa across the room. Leo Walker, 5 years old, frail but cheerful, snored lightly, one arm curled around a well-worn stuffed dinosaur. His chest rose and fell with a subtle wheeze, a constant reminder of the leukemia that had nearly claimed his life twice before. Diana's gaze softened as she watched him, not hers, but loved like he was. She rose slowly, wiping her forehead. Her back ached, not just from years of cleaning floors, but from the burden of grief she had never truly unpacked. Her own son, Malik, would have been Leo's age today if he hadn't died in that hospital 2 years ago, a misdiagnosed infection, a quiet cough, a system that didn't care enough to look deeper. Now she looked. She always looked. She knew the signs, the eyes, the skin, the shifts in energy. Diana had become more than a maid in this house. She was Leo's guardian angel, even if his father didn't see it. Outside, the gates buzzed. A sleek black Maserati rolled up the driveway. The tires crunched over the pebbled path like thunder. Anthony Walker had returned. Inside, Leo stirred. "Daddy," he mumbled sleepily. Diana quickly knelt beside him, straightening his blanket. "Shh, sweet boy. Let's not get too excited. Remember what the doctor said about resting your strength." Leo pouted. "But he always brings toys." She gave a small smile, brushing his golden bangs from his forehead. "Toys are lovely, but you know what's even better? Breathing easy." He laughed weakly. "You sound like a nurse." Her heart ached. She used to be. The door flew open. Anthony entered like a gust of wind, phone pressed to his ear, suit crisp, jaw tighter than steel. "No, Todd, I don't care what the board says. If they want to renegotiate, tell them I'll buy them out." He paused, noticing the maid and his son. "I'll call you back." He shoved the phone in his pocket and gave a nod toward Diana. "Miss Davies." She nodded silently, rising to stand. "Mr. Walker." Leo beamed. "Daddy!" Anthony softened just enough to cross the room and ruffle his son's hair. "Hey, champ. You staying strong?" Leo gave a weak thumbs up. "Diana said I could have pudding later." Anthony looked at her. "Is that okay?" Diana hesitated. "Yes, but in moderation. He's been very tired today." Anthony barely nodded. "He'll be fine. His new meds should kick in this week." He turned to pour himself a drink. Diana's eyes followed his hands. New meds? She hadn't seen any new prescriptions. In fact, she'd been keeping track of every bottle, every dosage. Something felt off. A soft squish sound broke her thoughts. She turned to see Leo happily slurping from a new pouch, something bright red. "Leo," she said gently, walking over, "where did you get that?" He grinned. "It was on the counter. It was next to my snacks. I thought it was mine." She took the pouch and inspected it. No label, no brand, just a clear pouch filled with red liquid. Her stomach dropped. "Leo, what does it taste like?" He shrugged. "Mummy, it tastes like ketchup." That's when the door swung open again. Anthony, returning from his call, froze. And then, "You let my son drink what?" His voice was thunder. And in the next second, Leo's body slumped sideways on the couch, eyes fluttering, the pouch slipping from his hand. Diana rushed forward. "Leo! Leo! Stay with me, baby!" His tiny frame trembled. Anthony pushed her aside, panic rising in his throat. "Call someone. Why is he shaking? What did you give him?" Tears welled in Diana's eyes. "I didn't give him anything. He grabbed it himself. This wasn't in his routine." But she was the only one who knew what really happened. And in that moment, the line between Billionaire and Maid vanished. There were only two parents, one child, and one terrible truth waiting to be uncovered. The room spun with panic. Leo's tiny body lay limp in Anthony's arms, his skin suddenly pale, his breath shallow. The pouch had fallen onto the rug, its red contents slowly bleeding into the ivory fibers like guilt. "Get help," Anthony bellowed, his voice cracked with fear. "Now." "I'm calling 911, Diana shouted, already dialing with shaking fingers. Her voice trembled as she gave the address. 5-year-old male, diagnosed with leukemia, collapsed after ingesting unknown liquid. Anthony knelt, holding Leo to his chest. He was fine a minute ago. He was laughing. "Children crash fast, especially when their immune systems are compromised," Diana snapped, eyes scanning Leo's body for any sign of swelling or trauma. "He needs oxygen now." She rushed to the hallway cabinet and retrieved the emergency oxygen tank she had insisted on months ago. Anthony had rolled his eyes at the time, thought she was being dramatic. Now she was his only hope. She slid the mask over Leo's face. "Breathe, baby. Breathe for me." Anthony's eyes darted between Leo and the pouch. Where did that come from? Who gave him that? Diana met his gaze, unwavering. "It wasn't me. I've never seen it before. He said it tasted like ketchup. That's not in his meal plan." He stood up, furious. "You're in charge when I'm not here. You should have stopped him." "I'm not a magician, Mr. Walker," she shouted, chest heaving. "I can't teleport across the room when a 5-year-old grabs something. I'm not the one who leaves strange pouches on the counter." The sirens echoed in the distance now, a sickening sound that made Diana's knees buckle slightly in relief and dread. Anthony paced like a caged animal. "I pay for specialists, doctors, private nutritionists. This isn't supposed to happen in my house." Diana stood, chest tight. "Then maybe, stop pretending money fixes everything. Leo isn't a business deal. He's a little boy." That silenced him, just for a moment. She took a breath, stepping closer to him. His body is fighting a war, and if something foreign got into his system, it could shut everything down. We don't have time for ego right now. The EMTs arrived. They lifted Leo onto a stretcher, fitted tubes, secured the mask, asked rapid-fire questions. Diana answered most of them. She'd been there. She knew his vitals. She knew his meds. She knew what he'd eaten and when. Anthony didn't. He stood back, helpless, watching his son disappear into a blinking, sterile ambulance. One of the EMTs turned to him. "Which one of you is riding with him?" Anthony looked at Diana. She didn't wait. She stepped forward. "He needs someone who knows what's going on," she said quietly. "You can follow in your car." He didn't argue. As the sirens wailed down the hill, the grand silence of Rose Hill Mansion returned. Only now, it wasn't elegant. It felt haunted. Before we continue, ask yourself this. If a stranger loved your child more carefully than you did, would you see it as betrayal or a second chance? Comment below. What would you do if you were Anthony? And please, if you're this deep into the story, don't just watch. Subscribe. This channel tells stories that speak to your soul, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. The sterile hallway of Geneva General Hospital buzzed with fluorescent lights and unanswered questions. Leo lay behind glass, hooked to machines, IV lines dripping slowly into his arm. The oxygen mask still covered most of his face, his little chest rising in slow, shallow waves. Anthony stood rigid outside the door, arms crossed, his jaw clenched. Every now and then, his fingers tapped against his elbow, betraying the storm brewing inside him. Diana sat in the corner, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes hadn't left Leo in over an hour. She'd offered to let Anthony sit. He refused. A young doctor finally approached, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Walker," he began, voice neutral, "your son is stable. The oxygen helped. We'll keep him overnight for monitoring." Anthony exhaled, tension falling from his shoulders in one silent drop. But, the doctor continued, glancing at Diana, his system showed signs of exposure to something, non-toxic but foreign, possibly expired or contaminated. We'll run more tests. Anthony blinked. You're saying it wasn't the leukemia? No, this episode wasn't cancer-related. It was something else, something recent. His gaze slowly shifted toward Diana. Back in the waiting room, Anthony exploded. I should have fired you the moment you started crossing boundaries, he snapped. First it was the organic teas, then the salt lamps, then insisting he needs a humidifier in every room. And now he's alive, Diana said coldly, standing, because of that oxygen tank I put in your hallway cabinet, the one you said was a waste of space. Anthony scoffed. Don't turn this into some savior story. He could have died in your care. He nearly died in your house, she shot back. But go ahead, yell at the black maid. That's easier than asking the real questions. His face darkened. This has nothing to do with race. Doesn't it? She said quietly. The silence between them was heavy. Anthony turned away. Later, back at Rose Hill Mansion, Anthony walked into the kitchen, scanning the counter. Nothing looked out of place, until he opened the trash. There it was, the pouch. He picked it up with a tissue, holding it to the light. Still no label. Just a faint imprint of something long rubbed away. His brows furrowed. He opened the fridge. Nothing matched it. Not the toddler food brands, not the hospital-supplied juices. Nothing. His mind raced, but his pride slammed the door on every suspicion. He tossed the pouch back in and closed the fridge with a snap. Upstairs, Diana sat by Leo's empty bed, carefully writing in a small leather notebook. She'd been keeping track for weeks. His energy levels, appetite, new symptoms. There were too many variables, too many hands in the pot, too much trust placed in people with lab coats, and too little in the people who were actually watching Leo live. Later that night, Anthony stood in his study, staring out at Seneca Lake. The lights of Geneva twinkled across the water like promises he couldn't keep. He poured himself a drink, then another. He didn't call Diana back, didn't thank her, didn't ask her to check on Leo. But he couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Don't yell at the black maid. Ask the real questions. He hated how much it echoed in his mind. Meanwhile, Diana tucked Leo's stuffed dinosaur into his hospital bed and whispered something in his ear. I'm not going anywhere, little man. I just need to find out what's really going on. The following morning, a thick grey fog rolled over Seneca Lake, turning the view outside Rose Hill Mansion into a washed-out watercolor. Inside, silence filled the halls, until the door opened with a creak, and Diana Davies stepped inside, her coat soaked, shoes squeaking against the marble floor. She had just returned from the hospital. Leo was stable. Anthony hadn't shown up. She wasn't sure what to expect walking into the mansion again. A pink slip? Cold silence? More accusations? Instead, she was met with something far stranger. Anthony Walker, in sweatpants, unshaven, and holding a steaming mug of coffee, in the kitchen. Miss Davies, he said flatly. She raised a brow. Didn't expect you to still be here. Didn't expect you to come back, he replied, sipping. She dropped her bag on the counter and removed her gloves. Leo asked for his dinosaur. I didn't think you'd remember. His silence answered for him. Outside, rain began to pound the glass, thick sheets of it, the kind of storm that made roads shut down and landlines useless. Diana walked to the mudroom window. That bridge by the vineyard? Probably flooded by now. Anthony checked his phone. No signal, no service. Looks like we're stuck. She gave a dry laugh. Rose Hill Mansion has everything, except storm-proof cell service. They both stood there for a beat too long, trapped, together, still angry, still tethered by the little boy lying in a hospital bed across town. Anthony finally broke the silence. I had the kitchen staff pack you meals for the hospital. They're in the fridge. She blinked, surprised. That's considerate. He shrugged. Doesn't mean I trust you. She nodded. That's okay. I don't trust you either. In the next room, The fire crackled to life. Diana sat near the hearth, flipping through Leo's care notebook. Anthony watched her from the doorway. "You really write in that thing every day?" "Every hour," she said without looking up. "Sleep patterns, appetite, facial color, sweating, it's all data." Anthony rubbed his forehead. "Doctors don't even do that." "They don't have to," she muttered. "They don't live with him." He crossed the room, sat on the opposite couch. The fire glowed between them like a quiet referee. Anthony took a breath. "You mentioned something yesterday about asking the real questions." She looked up. "And? What questions would you ask?" Diana closed the notebook gently. "I'd ask who's bringing unmarked food into your home," she said. "I'd ask why a pouch with no brand, no barcode, and no FDA label ended up next to your son's medicine." Anthony looked away. "I'd ask," she continued, "why your private nurse hasn't shown up in 3 days, and why the pouch looked suspiciously like the supplement she brings." A beat of silence. Then Anthony stood. "That's enough." "Why?" she asked, standing too. "Because it's coming from someone who isn't wearing a lab coat?" "Because it's coming from someone who's paid to clean my house," he snapped. Diana stepped closer. "No, Mr. Walker, I'm not just cleaning your house. I'm watching it burn, and I'm the only one trying to put out the fire." He opened his mouth to speak, but the power cut out. A loud click and darkness swallowed the room. Only the fire remained, casting dancing shadows across their faces. Diana sighed. "Perfect." Anthony looked at her. "How do you stay so calm?" "I've already lost one child," she said quietly. "Fear doesn't scare me anymore." The storm had quieted, but not the house. The power was still out, and Rose Hill Mansion now felt more like a tomb than a palace. Every creak of the old wood echoed through the halls, every flicker of candlelight casting doubt into the corners. In the library, Diana sat on the floor, her back against the bookcase, cradling her journal in her lap. Anthony entered quietly, his flashlight casting a pale glow across the titles: Harvard Business Review, Philosophy of Wealth, Raising a Titan. He lowered the beam when he saw her. "I figured you'd be in here," he said. She didn't look up. "Funny how this is the only room in the house that feels human." He walked slowly, hesitating before sitting beside her. "Leo's blood tests came in," he said. She looked at him now, cautiously. "It wasn't poison," he said. "It was something else. They're still testing." Diana's jaw tightened. "But it wasn't leukemia." "No, it wasn't." A long silence passed between them. Then Diana spoke. "My son died 3 years ago. His name was Malik." Anthony blinked. "He was 4.5, had a cough. The ER said it was the flu, sent us home. 3 days later, he collapsed." She swallowed. "I begged them to run more tests. They didn't, said I was overreacting, said I wasn't insured, said I should go to urgent care." Anthony's eyes lowered. "By the time they listened," she continued, "he had septic shock, organs shutting down. I held him as he slipped away. The only sound was the soft rustle of rain outside. I promised myself," she whispered, "if I ever saw another child in danger, I'd raise hell to keep them alive, even if the world called me just the maid." Anthony's voice was gravel. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said, staring ahead. "Just do better. You have the power to fight for Leo in ways I never could for Malik." Suddenly, a thought struck her. She stood quickly, going to the trash bin in the corner. "What are you doing?" Anthony asked. She pulled out the pouch again, the same one Anthony had discarded. This time, she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint yellow sticker inside the fold. She peeled it open gently, holding it to the candlelight. An inventory label. She gasped. "This isn't a food pouch. This is a supplement injection, IV grade, from a pharmaceutical sample pack." Anthony stood. "What?" "It's not for oral use, it's for hospital distribution, testing only." Her hands shook. "And the only person here who ever handled anything like this was Nurse Helena," Anthony finished, his face turning pale. "She was giving him unapproved meds," Diana whispered. Without telling me? Anthony's voice trembled. She swore she was coordinating with the doctors. She wasn't, Diana said, certain now. She brought it in herself. She looked up, fear and fire in her eyes. Anthony, Leo could have died from this, not because of his cancer, but because of someone pretending to help. He staggered back a step, his breath caught in his throat. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a father. Lost, ashamed, scared. Right now, someone just like Diana is working silently behind the scenes, saving lives in ways no one notices. If her story matters to you, if Malik's name deserves to be remembered, don't just scroll, subscribe. Because every view counts. Every comment lifts her name higher. And stories like this deserve to be heard. The storm had passed. The power flickered back on just before dawn, and Rose Hill Mansion came back to life. Soft hums, blinking lights, heaters groaning back into rhythm. But inside the kitchen, warmth came not from the walls. It came from Diana, standing in a faded apron frying eggs over a low flame. Anthony entered slowly, still in yesterday's clothes, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he'd been crying, or hadn't slept, or both. Diana glanced over her shoulder. "You look like you lost a lawsuit." He smiled, barely. "Feels more like I lost myself." She slid a plate onto the counter. "Eat." He hesitated. "Don't make me threaten you," she said, smirking. "You're not built for hospital food." He chuckled and picked up a fork. "Touché." For a moment there was silence, comfortable silence. He chewed slowly, watching her prep a thermos of tea. "Where'd you learn to do all this?" he asked. "My mama," she said. "She didn't believe in medicine." "Is that why you don't trust doctors?" "I trust doctors. I just don't trust that they always see us." She met his gaze. "They didn't see Malik, just another poor black woman with a sick kid." Anthony's smile faded. "They didn't see Leo either. Not really. I thought I was giving him the best care money could buy." "Money buys hands," she said softly. "Not hearts." He looked down at his plate. "I used to hold him all night when his mum was still here. After she passed, I didn't know how to be both things. I thought if I provided enough, it would count as parenting." "It counts," she said, "but not the way you think." He looked up. "Why didn't you quit, after everything I said? After I blamed you?" Diana leaned on the counter. "Because I never left my own son's side. And Leo, he's not mine. But my heart doesn't know the difference." Anthony swallowed hard. She continued, quieter now. "Do you know what it feels like to be invisible in someone else's house? To clean their floors, hold their crying child, memorize their medical history, and still be called the help?" His eyes filled with tears. "I do now," he whispered. Then a voice echoed faintly down the hall. "Diana?" Both of them turned, and there he was, Leo, wrapped in a hospital blanket, hair messy, holding his dinosaur. He had been released early that morning, and the first name he called for wasn't his father's. It was hers. Diana rushed toward him, dropping to her knees. "Baby boy," she whispered, holding him close. "You're squishing me," Leo giggled. She pulled back, eyes wet. "You scared me so bad." "I had a bad dream," he said, whispering. "You weren't there. I'm here now." Anthony stood back, watching the moment unfold. Something in his chest cracked open, something he had locked away since the day his wife died. And when Leo turned and said, "Daddy, are you mad at Diana?" Anthony knelt beside them both. "No," he said softly. "Not anymore." He looked at Diana. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." That night they sat together in the library, Diana, Anthony, and Leo between them, sipping warm tea and giggling at cartoons. The fire flickered gently, casting them in a warm orange glow. A family? Not yet. But the pieces were starting to fit. The next morning at Rose Hill Mansion started with rare warmth. Leo was laughing in the garden with Diana, chasing soap bubbles that glimmered like tiny planets. Anthony watched from the patio, sipping his coffee, still trying to understand how peace could look so simple. He had called the hospital, confirmed the unmarked pouch wasn't prescribed. They were launching an investigation into Nurse Helena, who hadn't responded to a single call since Leo's incident. Diana was right. Again. But peace is delicate. And sometimes, truth comes with teeth. Just after noon, a white SUV pulled up to the mansion gates. Diana looked up from watering the tomato plants and frowned. Two women exited the vehicle, one wearing scrubs, Nurse Helena, and the other, a sharply dressed attorney. Anthony met them at the door, tension already creeping into his shoulders. "Helena," he said coolly, "you've been unreachable." Helena looked too confident. "Because I was instructed to lawyer up," she said. "You're accusing me of endangering your son." Anthony blinked. "The pouch you gave him was approved," she snapped. "I have a signed order from his physician to begin supplement trials." She pulled out a manila folder. Inside was a document with Anthony's signature. He stared at it. "That's not my signature." The lawyer stepped forward. "It passed verification," Helena smirked. "It was emailed from your assistant's account." His mind raced. "Todd," he muttered. His assistant, his email, his auto-signature, all the paperwork he never reviewed. He looked up, horrified, and then Helena dropped the final dagger. "I believe this has all been orchestrated," she said. "By the maid." Anthony froze. "She's been poisoning your opinion of me, undermining your trust in your team, getting close to your son while making you look like the villain. Sounds calculated, doesn't it?" Diana had just stepped inside with Leo when she heard her name. The maid. She stopped mid-step. Anthony looked between Helena and Diana. His silence lasted too long. Diana's eyes narrowed. "Is this what we're doing now?" Helena crossed her arms. "You're out of line, Miss Davies. You're not a nurse, you're not family, you're a domestic worker." Leo flinched. Diana stepped forward, voice steady. "Say it again." Helena's eyes gleamed. "You don't belong in this house. You never did." Anthony should have spoken up. He didn't. He looked down. Diana turned to him, voice trembling. "You're really going to let her say that? After everything?" Anthony looked torn. "I need time to figure this out. I didn't know about the signature. I need to speak to legal—" Diana stepped back like she'd been slapped. "Wow," she whispered. "So this is how it ends." "Diana?" "No," she said. "It's fine. I'm just the maid, right? Who saves your son's life? Who listens? Who stays when you run?" She turned to Leo, kneeling. "I love you, little man. More than you'll ever know." His lip quivered. "You're leaving?" She kissed his forehead. "I don't have a choice." And just like that, she walked out. No suitcase, no protest. Just quiet heartbreak that echoed louder than any thunderstorm. Leo turned to his father. "You let her go?" Anthony didn't answer, because guilt had paralyzed his throat. The mansion was too quiet again. Not peaceful quiet, lonely quiet, the kind of silence that wrapped around your neck like a slow choke. Anthony stood at Leo's doorway, watching his son stare at the ceiling. The boy hadn't spoken in hours. His dinosaur lay limp at his side. "She's not coming back," Leo said finally. Anthony walked in, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Buddy, He stopped. He didn't know what to say. Not to a 5-year-old. Not when he'd just let the only person who made the house feel human walk out in tears. Leo turned to him, eyes glassy. "You didn't say anything when that lady was mean to her." "I didn't know what to believe." "She loved me," Leo whispered. "She didn't need proof." Down the hall, Anthony found himself in the library again, not reading, just sitting, staring at the same leather-bound notebook Diana had used to track Leo's life, hour by hour, heartbeat by heartbeat. He opened it, page after page, notes in careful handwriting, body temperature logs, food reactions, when Leo was happiest, when he seemed tired. Quotes from their conversations. "Leo said the flowers smell like sunshine today." And then, at the very back, a folded photo of a boy, Malik, eyes bright, smile wide, holding a paper heart that said, "Love you, Mama." Anthony's hands trembled. He looked at the notebook, the photo, the empty house around him. And for the first time in his life, he said it out loud. I was wrong. Across town, Diana sat on a park bench near Geneva's waterfront. The lake shimmered under the early evening sun. Families laughed in the distance, but she just stared at the water. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You dropped this," said a young girl, handing her a scarf. Diana smiled faintly. "Thank you." "You look sad," the girl added. Diana hesitated. "I said goodbye to someone I loved today." The girl looked confused. "Why?" Diana looked away. "Because I wasn't wanted." The child frowned. "Maybe they're just scared." She ran off before Diana could ask what she meant, but the words clung to her like dew. That night, Anthony stood at the front door of a modest home in Geneva. He held the notebook in his hand and something much heavier in his chest. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. The porch light flicked on. Diana opened the door, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" "I came to return this," he said, holding out the notebook. She didn't take it. "Keep it," she said. "It's Leo's story now." He nodded slowly. "And you're a part of it." She waited. Arms crossed. "Guard up." "I should have defended you," he said. The moment Helena opened her mouth, "I should have stood up. For you. For Leo. For what's right." "You didn't," she said flatly. "I know." Another pause. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," he added. "But I am asking you to believe that I see it now. Everything. What you gave. What you carried. What you lost." Her jaw clenched. "He cries for you. He won't sleep without you." A pause. "I can't fix what I broke, but I'd rather spend the rest of my life trying than live one more day in that house without your light." Silence. Then finally she spoke. "Do you even want me back? As your maid?" Anthony took a step forward. "No," he said softly. "I want you back. As family." The next morning, the gates of Rose Hill Mansion opened slowly, welcoming in not just a car, but a woman who had once walked out without looking back. Diana Davies stepped out, uncertain. She hadn't said yes, not with words. But when Anthony stood at her doorstep last night, saying family with tears in his eyes and Leo's dinosaur clutched in his hand, she knew she couldn't stay away. Not forever. Not from Leo. Not from the little boy who had brought her back to life. Inside, the staff stood silently in the grand foyer. Anthony met her at the door. This time, not in a suit. He looked real, human. There was no grand speech, no forced apology, just 4 words. "We're glad you're home." Diana looked around. The marble floors she had cleaned 1,000 times. The high windows that once made her feel small, but something was different now. There was a place for her here, not behind the scenes, not beneath anyone's feet. Here. She was seen. A small voice broke the stillness. "Diana!" Leo barreled down the stairs in socks too big, his dinosaur dragging behind him. He crashed into her legs, arms squeezing tight. She knelt, scooped him into her arms. "There's my brave boy," she whispered. "You missed pancakes," he said. She laughed. "Let's fix that, shall we?" Later that afternoon, Diana sat in the garden, sunlight spilling across her lap. Leo napped nearby on a blanket. Anthony approached slowly and offered a warm mug of tea. She took it without a word. He sat beside her. "I called the hospital," he said. "Helena's been fired. She'll be facing an inquiry for administering unauthorized treatments." Diana nodded. "Good." "I also made a donation," he added, "to Geneva Children's Hospital, in Malik's name." Her eyes widened. "It'll fund a diagnostic wing, so no other mother's ignored when she says something's wrong." Diana's throat tightened. She looked down at her tea, blinking fast. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Anthony said. "Thank you for saving my son, for saving me, for showing me what love looks like when it doesn't ask for anything in return." They sat in silence for a while, watching the breeze sway through the roses. "Do you think she knows?" Diana asked softly. "Who?" "Your wife." Anthony looked up at the sky. "I hope she sees this. I hope she knows Leo's finally surrounded by the kind of love she would have wanted for him." Diana nodded, wiping a tear. "Then let's make sure it stays that way." As the sun began to set, Leo stirred from his nap and climbed into Diana's lap. Anthony pulled a soft quilt over them both and sat beside them. Not as a boss, not as a billionaire, as a father, and something else, a man. Learning to love again. If this story moved you, if you felt anything in your chest watching Diana fight for a child who wasn't hers, don't just click away, subscribe, because every subscriber helps us tell more stories that matter, and maybe, just maybe, the next one will heal someone else.